Casimir! Called a voice in the dark. Casimir did not respond. He was too comfortable to respond. His fingers had finally become warm again, and the cold of the night felt like a distant memory. Casimir! Called the voice again. It was louder this time. What? He grumbled. Get up! You must protect the farmstead. What do you mean? He mumbled, turning over into his cot. He was dreaming. He was on a boat on a calm but dark sea. There was a single lighthouse, and its light pierced through the dark like a sword through skin. Casimir, wheezed Mother. There are hussars outside. They have swords. Hussars? He repeated. Winged hussars. But that's impossible. The winged hussars are on the royal guard. What, by the gods, would they be doing all the way out here, on our land? He said. They're not leaving, Casimir. I think they're searching for someone. Casimir's eyes opened. He sat up. His mother was at the door, her lamp illuminating his room. I see. You're right. They are royal hussars. I need to get dressed. I'll leave the light. What's the time? Early morning. The sun's yet to rise. She will be making haste, though. He, corrected Casimir. Ortak is a god, not a goddess. Casimir threw on his finest zupan, which, admittedly, was far from fine. The fur was a little aged, and its bristles tickled his neck. His hand hovered over the shamshir. But then he decided against it. Best not to present himself as an enemy. Casimir hung the lantern from a coat rack. It lit the entire foyer nicely. He patted himself down one more time, then he pulled the door open. The man in the doorway was tall and beautiful, although not as tall as Casimir. His eyes were not the same colour. One was blue like the sea, the other green as fresh grass. Both were large, like coins, and both shone brightly like two gems. They also looked in complete opposite directions. This detail had an odd effect. Sometimes such eyes made a man look like an oaf. With this one, it did no such thing. With this man, it seemed as though he simply had his eyes on everything at once. It felt as though he knew all the answers, because the answers could not hide from him. His hair was hewn short, almost to the skull, but even then the platinum blonde shone through the skin. Indeed, it was a beautiful man who stood there, wrapped in an unimaginably expensive travelling cloak. Prince Machias? Asked Casimir. The fourth, he responded. Casimir bowed, but it wasn't a very deep bow, or a particularly polished step. Casimir was not accustomed to bowing to anything. I have come on urgent business. Could you perhaps explain why this was outside your doorstep? Asked the prince. He held up an elegant iron band. Some of Katerzyna's hair was tangled around the metal. Machias took a sudden, deep breath. His expression softened. My brothers would have killed you already. Except for Lukash. He would have tortured you first. You're a half-breed, and my sister's crown was found outside your home. I will give you a chance to explain yourself. Half-breed or not, you are important to me. All of my subjects are. You might be surprised to find out the sheer effect of Machias's words. Half-breed was a reality Casimir had accepted a long time ago, but to be called a subject, a Westerner, by a prince in public, he didn't know how to feel about this. My prince, he began. Machias smiled warmly. Perhaps you would like to sit down? Asked Casimir, who gestured behind him. Machias's eyes peered over Casimir's form and into the farmstead for just a second. You want me to step inside your little hut? I was inviting you into my homestead. A sour taste filled Casimir's mouth. A sour taste and the hot sting of embarrassment. I shouldn't, he said. But then the cold wind blew, and both men shivered. Machias's eyes widened in either direction. Although, it is dark. I suppose none would know. Machias brushed past Casimir and stepped further into the light. He took in a deep breath. Smells like a kitchen, but I suppose that's to be expected in such a humble domicile. Is my mother's cooking unpleasant to your senses, Lord Machias? My nose has always been particularly sensitive to onions, I admit. Do you have any vodka? I do, Prince Machias. Let me get you some. Casimir fled into the kitchen, where his mother was hiding in the broom closet. She stuck her head out. What are you looking for? Vodka, he asked, hands out, looking very empty. Mother pointed to the tops of the shelves. Casimir quickly poured out a tumbler of vodka and went back into the living room. Machias walked up to the portraits of his family. He scrutinized each one expressionlessly. How charming. He took the tumbler and downed it in one. He placed it on the mantel of the fireplace, where a wet rim stain seeped into the wood. Your sister did indeed come by, your majesty. I was up in the middle of the night, trying to keep my berries warm, when I heard her outside the boundaries of my property. At first I thought she was a wolf. When I saw it was none other than the princess herself, I couldn't believe my eyes. Where did she go? Asked Machias. She was headed to the enchanted grove under the mountain, my prince. Casimir pointed in the direction of the peak, through the walls at an imaginary vista. That way. I tried to warn her of the dangers, my lord, but she's a princess, and I'm just Casimir. Casimir? Asked the prince. Is that your name? It's a good name. A reliable, loyal name. It was not always my name, admitted Casimir. But it was close enough, and I preferred it. Anyways, she threw her crown down at my feet, and I left it there, knowing to be found with it on my person was certain death. Death, yes, whispered Prince Machias. Torture, too. Prolonged torture for an uncertain duration of time. Time, Casimir, I'll be honest, I am most pressed for. I'm hunting, I'm searching for her desperately, and I must find her before the others do. Are you all competing, my lord? Let's not call it that. We're all concerned for dear Katerzyna's safety, to varying degrees of passion. We all just want to see her home safe. That's good, said Casimir. Seems like a strange thing to make a sport of. Prince Machias made a queer expression with his mouth. His lips turned upward, but the rest of it rippled like a snake coiling into itself, like as though his indecisive mouth was on the verge of betraying him. What could you possibly understand about the ways of Princes, Casimir? He said, both eyes penetrating him at different angles. Casimir's stomach crawled. Not much, he admitted. That's right. I'm glad we cleared that up. Thank you for inviting me in. The light of your lantern was most comforting. The warmth of your vodka invigorating. I shall be on my way. If it was possible, Machias wrapped himself even tighter into his own cloak. He looked like a cocoon. I'll leave you with a bit of advice, Casimir. Don't talk to the others. If you see Marta, send her elsewhere. She's a thief and a rogue. If you see Lukash, hide for your life. He fled the intrigue of courts years ago. He's smarter than most men give him credit for. He gained power through other means. Special Inquisitor, you know. In line with his position, he's called not on hussars, but on practicals for aid. You know what he looks like. Ugly, bald bastard, with an eye that's red and an eye that's orange. He pushed the door open, and the rising sun came into full view. Look, Otak has risen. How glorious, he said, his breath billowing out in clouds of vapour. Sunlight shone through the breathy clouds. A cool, damp moisture had coated everything. The grass, the homestead, and now Casimir's skin. It felt like the world, the grass and the stones. Even the fickle wind was paying attention. Glorious indeed, but if I may... Get my horse ready, he called forward to a cluster of horse riders. One cantered forward, reins clutched in his hand. A second hussar held out a steel helmet decorated with wings of tin silver. Machias's horse bent at the knee and offered its back. Its saddle, Casimir noticed, was also decorated with wings. They were meant to be Pegasus, and supposedly fancy saddles made the horses ride faster. Very well, he yelled. The little fool has fled for the trees. We must bring her back first. When at that moment, 4 Dysterias charged past in flashes of brown and cream. A voice, eerily similar to Machias's, yelled aloud, "To the forest!" Machias pulled hard on his reins. "Miklaj!" he yelled. How did none of you hear them?" His men, blushing at the blunder, set chase. "Thank you, brother," called the quickly fading voice, "but I think I'll take it from here. No doubt you'll prefer to be found by me, you know." They really are competing, thought Casimir. All the princes were competing. Machias was raring to go, but Casimir wrenched him back by tugging on the reins. "How dare you!" roared Machias. "How dare you!" He held out a hand in an odd gesture. Casimir thought it had some kind of meaning, like when priests warded off the dead, but nothing happened. "You cannot simply charge into the forest. There's a river one can only see once they're deep within the forest boundaries. It doesn't look very wide, but make no mistake, it is unfathomably deep. You and your horses will drown." Machias, hearing the gravity of Casimir's voice, stopped to listen. "I can swim," Machias assured Casimir, "but my men..." "There's a bridge. It's an evil-looking thing, made from salt stacks or I don't know. Due to its reflection on the water, it'll look like the evil eye. You must cross it, but once you do, you'll be in the country of the gods. Be wary. Do not drink from the river, even if it looks good. And don't you ever go swimming in it. You'll never be found." Machias's eyes narrowed. "How do you know all this?" "I went there once." "Why?" Casimir faltered. I ran away from home once. If you don't return in a few days, I shall come to find you." "Make it 3, Machias nodded. "Casimir, you are a loyal man. Half-breed or not, I shall see that you will be rewarded when I am king." "Good luck, Prince Machias," said Casimir, before Machias could remember to add any more stipulations to the agreement. Casimir watched the men ride towards the forest. They became small dots on the horizon. He went inside and began to pack, knowing he would have to depart soon. "Who was it?" asked Mother. "Were they tax collectors? Did you tell them we've already paid?" "Not tax collectors, Mother. That was Prince Machias." "Prince Machias!" she gasped, turning to the wall decorated with royal portraits. "Are you sure? I didn't know," she squeaked. "It's not your fault, Mother. How could you have known the Royal Hussars were anything but brigands?" "I should have invited him inside," she mumbled faintly. "He's enlisted my help." Mother perked up. "Oh?" "He's going into Rubazar's grove." "Oh," she said, in an altogether graver tone. "I shall help if I can. Like Casimir said to a certain princess, most men would not survive in the enchanted grove. What hope did a prince have?" Casimir decided to bring sausage, bread, melons, and dried grape leather for energy. He had a roll of hard cheese, a small gourd of wine, milk-based vodka, and a ceramic pot set to heat the alcohol in. On second thought, he also brought a tightly sealed clay bowl of yogurt and a block of ghee wrapped in paper. On third thought, a few pomegranates might not be a bad idea. Everyone knew they had magical properties and could invigorate one's strength. He'd eat a half a day, and since he only planned to be gone for 4, 2 would do him. The rest he'd leave for Mother, who would have to mind the farm while he was gone. Mother put down a basket of freshly washed garments, thick quilted caftans, and a warm-looking papak of white fur on Casimir's cot. "I'm surprised you weren't angrier when I told you I'd be leaving." She blew a lock of stray, blonde, becoming grey hair out of the way and said, "You can't stop your son from helping a prince. It's an honour." Mother's eyes gained a misty quality to them. "Might Prince Machias dine with us?" "I can't imagine it." "Are you sure?" She looked around at her humble abode, and the light in her eyes faded. There was a small table, chairs, and some wall ornaments. There was no wall between their kitchen and the sitting room, so the handmade cushions and quilts smelt of onions. Machias was clear on how he felt about that. There was a lovely fireplace, however, albeit with a dirty little vodka stain, and a shepherd's chest Mother had inherited. On it, scratched in with a knife some decades ago, was a message: "For things which prefer to live in the dark." This box, Casimir knew at least, was worth something. Maybe it was worth more than the entire farm. He went over bent at the knee and traced his finger around the original etchings, concentric circles with flowers in them, old signs made for warding off evil spirits. Yes, he could feel it. There was a coldness in the wood that was not expected of birch, a faint pull on the skin, as though you'd caught your finger on tiny hooks, inquisitor's hooks. He hoped Lukasz would not come. The box was heavy. There was something inside, and he didn't know what. He was always too afraid to open it. Mother had told him it kept away evil spirits, and that was enough for him. Mother was still thinking about the princess and her family. Although, if we... No. She shook her head, and in doing so, shook the funny expression off her face. "What?" asked Casimir. "Nothing, just being stupid." "Tell me what?" Casimir insisted. "Oh, well, I was thinking that if you were the one to find and return Princess Katerzyna, then you might gain her hands by right of favour. Wouldn't that be nice?" she asked to him. "You'd be a prince by the ancient laws. You'd be just like King Sigismund himself. He was of common stock when he was born, don't you know?" A strange tension yawned and stretched its arms in the bed of Casimir's heart. "Yes, I guess it would make me like Sigismund," he replied softly. "No, I've met her already. You wouldn't like her," he said with some sureness. "Really?" she asked, sounding crestfallen. "I'm afraid not," he said, rubbing his chin in deliberation. "No, I'm quite sure you'd hit her over the head with your frying pan one day. Regicide is a grave crime, even if she is 7th for her name and 4th in a line of princesses. Her mother's powerful and maraud, and her aunt is a war jarl in the East Vale. They'd probably kill us both." "I'm very adaptable," she responded. Casimir sniggered. "No, you aren't." "Fine, piss on your poor mother's dreams then," she shouted, as she launched the basket of fresh laundry at her only son. The basket bounced off Casimir's head. He rubbed the spot where it landed. Over the next day, Princes Vladimir and Vladislav both came looking. Vladimir, 54 summers old, was Sigismund's grandson. He was also Vladislav's father and uncle, but nobody spoke about that in public. Everyone in this part of Samarta knew and looked for the signs. They say he, Vladislav, had 5 fingers and a thumb. That's why the pinky of his glove was extra thick. Mother stared at that hand the entire time she was interrogated. Vladislav, feeling far too proud to address the proverbial elephant, pretended as though there was nothing unusual with her misplaced fascination. He left promptly. Then there was Princess Marta, who was famous because she dressed like one of the men. She didn't even bother to stop by, so neither Casimir nor his mother told her she was going the wrong way. They just watched her ride away on a familiar horse. Prince Lukasz did not come. And last of all, to Casimir's pleasant surprise, was the unexpected return of Merchant, who looked to be in a foul mood. It likely had to do with his pack, which was looking unusually light and uncumbersome. The horse he had ridden that day he brought the Shamshir was also nowhere to be seen, which is when Casimir realised why Marta's horse seemed so familiar. She was riding on Raincloud. He marched along and came to a stop in front of the farm. He bent over, wheezed, wiped sweat from his brow, and then stood tall again. His hair, always a little grimy, was now plastered to his scalp in an unattractive way. "Hello, Casimir," he huffed. "Ma'am, how the spirit of the sword?" "Not well, if I'm honest. I fear you're faring no better." "Is an understatement," said the merchant. He threw a thumb back the way he came. 3 years I travelled to get my goods back from Avanti. I've had to fight off bandits, pay officials extortionary bribes, hide in gutters and camp in rotten trees or under the naked sky in winter. And for what? So that some spoiled princess can commandeer my goods to aid in the search effort of Princess Katerzyna the 7th? I swear, this is why I left in the first place, Casimir. "I thought I recognised Raincloud," said Mother. "Princess Marta, was it?" "She..." Merchant made a ward with his hands. "You know." Mother understood the meaning. "Our princes and princesses are powerful, Merchant. They're not strange things." "In Avanti, they treat you like a king. A king! Here, the king's litter treat you like a used lamb's shank. I wish she had the dignity to at least leave me with a horse. She already had a spare. She didn't need my tall, sweet thoroughbred. She was called Raincloud on account of her skin, grey, but not too grey. She was not a storm, she was a... The wind blew a crisp, cool breeze, and Casimir could almost feel the soft rain Merchant imagined himself. All the humour seemed to have been sapped from him. His features, which were once marked by lines of laughter, now looked scarred with the knives of disappointment, scarred by more than a half-decade of wasted time. A real lady would have paid for my services, Casimir. Merchant had a lump in his throat. Mother and Casimir remained quiet, letting him grieve. "If you're up for it," said Casimir after a quiet while. "I've been employed by Prince Machias to aid him in the forest." "The forest?" replied Merchant. "But Rubazal lives there." "He does. No doubt Prince Machias is lost across the evil eye. He's promised me wealth in return. No doubt I'd be obliged to compensate you for everything you've lost, should you wish to aid me." "I'm not sure I have anything left in my bags to help." "Sure you do. Besides, you have experience. Experience is priceless." "Well, now that I think about it, I have a few things left. Things she thought were useless. A jar of nectar, which she thought was plain old syrup. A pot of universal pheromones, which she thought was just fertilizer. And, well, that is useless, except for when it isn't." "They all sound very useful," agreed Casimir. "We'll leave in the morning." "Very well then," said Merchant, who was always happier when travelling. Mother looked between the two boys and sighed. "Would you like some holep?" "Holep?" squeaked the Merchant. "I'd love some."